Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Belinda Carr Show. Today, we're going to be talking about automating building layouts. So, the first stage in a design process is called the schematic design stage. That's when you come up with a vague idea of what your building's going to look like, where it's going to be located, and its connection to the rest of the buildings or the city around it.
That's more of the massing, the general layout. It's all about what's going on at the site.
And this can be approached from several different angles depending on what industry you're in.
It's a combination of the architect, the developer, and the contractor all collaborating together.
Correct, yeah. So the developer is looking at it and he wants to analyze how many units he or she can fit on the site, because he is looking mainly at return on investment. They want to cram as many units as possible. An architect in the ST phase is more concerned about the design of the building, the shape of it,
how the space flows, things like that.
Exactly. And how they don't dive too deeply into building codes, but they do at the same time, because they have to figure out the height constraints of the building and relationship to other buildings around it, how the facades interact with other building facades. And then a GC would look at it from the cost, because he has to come up with a rough estimate of the project cost.
Kind of looking at the buildability of the project.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of different people are putting their heads together, and there's a lot of effort put into this initial phase. But the big thing about this is that no one's getting paid for this.
Exactly, because out of 10 or 20 different schematic design iterations, only one might actually work out, might prove to be a profitable business project.
Yeah, and that's all they're looking for is one to work, because at the end of the day, it's one site, one building.
Exactly, yeah.
So this kind of optimization reminds me of my time at an architecture firm in New York City, where we did a lot of high-rise residential buildings, and I spent multiple days coming up with different layouts for apartment units on a specific floor. And so there are certain requirements, certain square footage requirements, bedroom size requirements, and low-income unit requirements that I had to squeeze all together. But we utilized a whole week in doing that process. Now, if there was a way to automate that, which I think there is nowadays, that would completely eliminate that whole week of exercises.
Yeah, that's an important point, because it's not a waste of time. It is important, but it has to be done fast. You need speed in that stage, because no one's being paid, and there are dozens of iterations you could go through.
These iterations that you do in that final design that you come up with at the schematic design is still going to change drastically moving into the design development phase, and then even further in the construction phase.
Exactly, because it could be completely scrapped in the next phase, and you could come up with something more efficient. So you cannot waste too much time in the beginning. So there is a software out there called TestFit. It's developed by Clifton and his team, and they're actually based here in Dallas. So TestFit does exactly what we are talking about, tries to automate that entire schematic design phase. And that software can be used by several different people. Like developers, for example, like we discussed, they can look at unit mix, 1 bedroom versus 2 bedroom versus studio apartments, and what sort of mix you can achieve in a certain building layout.
Kind of like a game of Tetris.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And they also can use TestFit to look at road layout and parking configurations, really quick designs. Architects can use TestFit for different shapes of the building. What's most pleasing on the site? What works with all the other buildings around it?
Or what's most efficient?
And architects can even look at it in terms of number of stories and the overall height of the building. And then GCs can use TestFit for cost, takeoff, the cost of the structure and
that initial estimating phase.
Yes. So let's dive into the story behind TestFit and its evolution over the past couple of years. So today we have Clifton, founder of TestFit, who's also in Dallas. Thanks for joining us, Clifton.
Yeah, thank you, Belinda. Appreciate you having me.
So I was looking into your company, and I saw somewhere that the goal of your company is to democratize intelligent building design. How did you get from an architecture background to that point?
All right, so like that's a very deep kind of mission, and on its head, it doesn't sound so nice, It's like every building that gets crafted by an architect is intelligently conceived in my mind. So what we're really talking about is how we go about the process of getting to, a building design. So it's really about informing the process as opposed to making the process intelligent. Um, and so like, it's a mission statement that I've been stewing over, for like 2 years, right? So I would say that yes, like our mission is more to democratize the informed building design as opposed to the intelligent component, because TestFit can only do so much writing an algorithm. We would rather act like an exoskeleton around an architect or someone that's got actual, living, breathing intelligence. That's sort of the perspective now.
I feel like we come from similar backgrounds in the sense that we both got our architecture degree, entered the field, realized how reliant on manual labor it is, were frustrated with it, and then went about different ways of automating it.
Yeah, I agree. I remember back when I was drafting and picking up red lines, coming home, I was married early. I would tell my wife at 22, like my right index finger is literally killing me right now. I think I clicked 25,000 times this week. Like, and I didn't really even have metrics, frankly, for how many times I actually clicked. But the fact that my job required so many clicks was kind of
Ridiculous.
yeah, a bit ridiculous. Yeah, I feel for the architects out there picking up red lines. Like I was down in San Antonio with a customer, and I was watching one of the younger architects work, and he was like literally tracing contours, and I just remember looking at that like, all right, well, that's like 50,000 clicks that we don't need like an intern to ever do.
Exactly.
It's like we can probably just automate that. And anyway, so you just see those opportunities in the industry, and I'm 5 years out from the last time I really picked up red lines, and it was just a stark reminder. Like every day I come to work, like I'm here as one of the few people that is really able to build a vision and try to enact change on AEC. It's a big responsibility, and I can't believe that we're here, frankly. Like, it took a lot, but a lot more to go.
So you started off by automating parking lot design, correct?
So that's a good question. The first thing that we automated, my co-founder and I, was a unit mix solver. And so, the story is not very clean. It wasn't like I one day had a light bulb and was like, I'm going to go build this company, and this company is going to do this thing. And, our mission will be to democratize informed building design. Like that wasn't even on my radar as as a 25-year-old. So I was working just in a professional capacity and trying to automate like how you solve the unit mix. And that was the first thing that I was focused on. And using Excel, you can get really close, right? Like, but it's cumbersome. You have to like really figure out how to get the CAD file and the Excel model to talk to each other. And, you have all these other deadlines that people are asking you to solve for. So you invariably don't really have time to do research and development as a grunt employee. So, I called my buddy Ryan Grieg. He's now my co-founder. So on the intro, I think you said I'm the founder. I'm the co-founder.
Yep.
Ryan's really the founder. Like he was the guy that built everything. I was told by the place where I was working, like, no, we're not into you doing any research and development, here, but good luck doing it on nights and weekends. So I got the green light to work on
I got the same
this. Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah. Innovate on your own time. We're not into it. So, I was working on it with him nights and weekends. I call him like, hey, here's how a unit mix, needs to be solved. And he would send back a terminal application where you would literally just type in the length of the building corridors, and then it would spit out, okay, here's how you should solve, this building to hit your mix with the least amount of percent error in like 8 different categories. So that was the first thing. And it was a terminal application. And I was like, wow, you built this in 3 days. And I spent 3 months building an Excel model that didn't even get close to sort of solving the way it needed to solve. And that's when it really hit me. Like, I had been working on Dynamo scripts and Lisp routines and stuff to help my job kind of be a lot easier. But it would take me 100 times the amount of time that it would take Ryan to step into a design problem, like an engineering problem, and be able to solve it. And it just hit me that software engineers they're magicians, in a way. And, every step of the way, they have continued to impress me. Like, it was initially we're solving this thing in a terminal, and then he made a graphical interface where you could like literally draw the property line. Like, you can see it in the app today, the exact same thing. You draw the property line and the building generates inside it. And like, he built that in 2016, like a long time ago. And we had a beta, and, so this has been a long time coming. What we've done has been to focus, on configurators as the approach to automation. And the first really algorithm that we did was for wraps, which is a rectangular parking garage with 90 to 100 units per plate, all the way around it. And this is, Belinda, you're from Texas now, so you've seen these. They're these battleship-sized buildings that are the buildings that effectively work for how our economy works in the United States. So that was wrap. We didn't do parking for about a year. Like, we started releasing in October of 2017 with the wrap, and then we did a podium, and then we did a wrap podium, and we did our first surface park thing, and then we added a little tool that you can do mixed use. And that was kind of the first year of features, was just how do we get to support more sort of shapes at the high density multifamily. And then when it became
And you were doing this
apparent,
in conjunction with a full-time job, or you had quit and said, okay, this is my future. This is what I want to do.
oh yeah. There was a point in time when I definitely quit to work full-time on TestFit. So if you want to found your own startup, my advice would be try to figure out how you can do it like 30% of it in your nights and weekends. And then when you hit 30%, then maybe it's time to jump. But remember, like, this thing didn't make any money. So I'm sitting here, like, Ryan and I are burning through our savings, and we didn't really know that you could go raise money. And like, you didn't really, like, kind of naive in that sense. And
especially in the software world. My gosh, there's a lot of money out
yeah, there is, but so yeah.
but it does
To answer your
limit what you
question,
can work on. But yeah,
to answer your deeper question, we started because drawing wraps is really annoying, and frankly, like, my roadmap was to get to parking, and to get to like all the things that you see in the app today is like years of thought put into how we were going to finally get there. And then 2 years in, we released parking, and our parking configurator is, it's the gold standard.
so did you have to learn a particular programming language, or do you do the parameters?
Co-founder,
Yes.
he is a genius. I can propose parameters, like, I know that as an architect, the way that I want to interface with my building is sort of from the unit up, as opposed to from like the massing down. So the way that we input units is we've got like a unit depth and it's a unit width and the kit of parts, and here's how these units work together, and and then that gives me the next layer of information that I need to start putting the corridor in, and then the stairs and the life safety and everything. So it's not so easy as to say in TestFit, oh yeah, you just plug in your building mass width is 60 feet and it generates, everything inside that. It's not how it works. You have to actually build out from first principles how that section across the building is going to work. And most people don't realize that. They just, they think that, oh, it's just a thing that generates things. Yeah. Like, no, you got to be thoughtful. Like if you give it garbage parameters, it's going to give you a garbage building.
I think you and your team refer to the program as like an Iron Man suit, where it's like co-creation, correct? You're still in control of the program. You're still guiding it to the path that you wanted to get to.
Yeah. That's where, the early feedback that we got, and the reason why I feel like we're being quite successful now is the architects were saying, okay, like this thing is great at the logic that it does, but the logic that it does is acontextual in certain ways. And so if you think about the criteria for what a great building actually is, it's not just that it stands up. Like a good building is strategic, it's systemic, it's sustainable, it's beautiful, it's experiential, it's meaningful. Most importantly, it's contextual. So what we have is a situation where they're able to reach into the model, the generated model, and edit it. And that was, kind of new, circa 2017. And we call it manual mode, but it's like, when you build a block, and like, remember back in AutoCAD days, you're building a block and you've got like some parametrics associated with it. And, it's great, like while you have the block with the parameters in it for what it does at the time, but eventually you might need to explode it to remove pieces of information that are already in it that are superfluous or whatever. So all we do is we have like, the ability to explode that model into basic components and then edit those, in a
While
more
still being
contextual
linked
setting.
to the main model, correct? It's not disconnected when you do that.
No, it's the parameters persist.
Okay. So after someone has tweaked the model to like a massing model that they are comfortable with or that they see potential in, how do they proceed from that step? Do they export it and use it in Revit or any other?
So it really depends upon where you're at in the process. So TestFit has been fortunate to have customers from the architecture background, the engineering background, construction, and development. So everybody is using the feasibility tool for slightly different reasons. So if you're an architect that, our core architecture group is people that typically are not getting paid for feasibility studies. Okay, well, that's a great incentive to automate them and make them more effective. On the development side is people that do not get their feasibility studies for free from architects. We've got pretty good product market fit with them. And what we enable them to do is to look at sites and to kill off stuff that doesn't work before they are willing to spend the 5 to 15 grand, that an architect is going to bill for a whole, feasibility SD package. Construction, they're interested in getting quantity takeoff. They're interested in getting the information about a deal to the development client, from a construction lens. So construction cost, solving the building with specific means and methods in mind, like modular. So, to answer your question, like, yeah, you can use it to jumpstart a Revit process if you'd like, but in reality, 90% of deals in TestFit are going to die. Like, that's just how it works. This is why we have feasibility, is to figure out whether or not it should go into SDs.
That's tricky because you talked about quantity takeoff. So you have to design the software all the way to that level, even though another client, like the developers, would only use it for massing.
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
it's perplexing to the VC world why we would build, features for architects that developers want to use, and features for developers that the contractors are interested in, and features for the architects that, frankly are pricing. Um, we're getting to a place where people in our generation want to be more interconnected. They want to understand the perspective of their clients. They want to understand how they can serve their clients better. And democratizing this information, like, this is why it's democratized. Like, our goal is to try to explain to developers, architects, general contractors, everybody that's kind of working on the deal together, what's going on in the deal. And right now it's quite opaque. And these aren't even projects. These are just people that are emailing each other about a possible, a prospective deal that they could be doing, a big construction package or a big deal together on. It might not even be big. It could be, 5 units.
Yeah.
You know,
So how's the reception to this software changed over the past couple of years? Like when you started it versus now, are people more accepting and they excited about it?
uh, man, that is a good question. Um, I'll maybe boil it down to the kind of responses that we get, because, remember, these are humans on the receiving end of learning about us, right? So um, nobody really, realistically, humans do not like change. I mean, the moment you introduce change into any ecosystem, it's immediately perceived as an enemy or a
A
threat,
threat,
or,
yeah.
there is always that group of people. People with vision, I think, and people that really understand kind of the intricacies of how the development, like the private development world work, they love it. So, like, we don't have a whole lot of friction there. But if you're like a capital A architecture firm that does, I would say crafted buildings that really, first principles details, we're going to go into, every scale of the building and be thoughtful about how that thing comes together. They're kind of abhorrent of this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it does basically remove the whole, you know, thinking back to design studios, right? Like, it's a 16-week course, and there's like, 16 weeks to design a single building, and, TestFit comes in and you can do it in 30 milliseconds. I mean, how is it not hard to cope with how the world
Like
will
an extreme
change?
reaction or something, yeah, to the
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
That's interesting.
But like, we're not interested in having, paying customers that hate us.
Yeah.
So, like that's not something that, I'm not gonna try to uh wrestle with that. So we typically follow our customers and what they want. And frankly, we're really blessed because half of our customers are developers, the other half are architects, and like, it has stayed that way for 5 years. So
Like a
we are
healthy
getting
balance
equal.
between the
Yeah,
two.
I think it's healthy because we're getting the feedback from the design community, which is, hey, like, we really need to start caring about lower detail information, and, understanding really how this building, like, they're really thinking about it like a building. And then the development side is like, it's not really a building yet, it's a deal, and like, we really need to sort of broaden the scope and maybe do deeper pricing. And so having the two demographics in your ears at the same time I've found it to be incredibly helpful, because it's an ecosystem problem. It's not that the architects are bad at drawing things. It's not that the developers can't figure out density on their own. It's that they right now, they just do not have time to thoughtfully consider every single deal coming through their door.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little more about deal information modeling, or DIM?
Uh,
Do you have fun coming up with that acronym?
we try to have, fun if we can. So DIM, you know, it's kind of my reaction to the BIM heads. And, I don't know, there's a lot of people that are obsessed with BIM, and BIM is the end all be all of the world. And, it's an incredible idea. Like, I don't think it's been executed, frictionlessly at all. And that's like a huge problem. And the leadership of the companies that build the BIM platforms, they don't have competition. So
Yes. Or
so
if they do, they just buy
BIM
them out.
is it. Like, I'll use another Tony Stark reference, is like, there was this scene where it's Howard Stark, Tony's dad, and he's talking to him through a reel, like a video recorded like 30 or 40 years ago. And he goes, I'm limited by the technology of my time. Maybe you will do better. And like what you have right now in the way that BIM works is that it was limited by the technology of its time. And frankly, there needs to be something else out there. But our mission isn't to, go compete with BIM. Our mission is much more about how we solve deals. And so that's why I jokingly have created the deal information model. And it started out as kind of like a joke, but it's very real. It's like, we need to take into account how this building is financed in order for us to understand its feasibility. And if we're limited to the range of a building can only be, for an enterprise developer, there's no sense in them doing a deal that's less than 5 million or like there's a minimum size. And some architects are like, why does anybody want to do like a 10 unit deal? It's like, well, the unit economics don't really work on a 10 unit deal. So there's a lot of people that look at the missing middle and are like, someone should do something about this, and it's completely opaque. So the idea about deal information modeling is to try to show the whole stack. And when I say stack, I mean architect, developer, engineer, broker, banker, investor, the LP, an LP investor. Like insurance companies, they put up 90% of the equity that goes into the buildings that architects design, and they never meet these people. They have no idea that they exist. So bringing some clarity to what's going on inside the deal is really all deal information modeling is. And the way that we practically do it inside TestFit, we have a module for construction pricing that's really rudimentary, but again, we would like to expand that. Same thing for financing, really rudimentary. It'll be expanded. And it's no different than how an architect does massing mode. We do some massing, and the next step in the process to solve more of our assumptions away is to put units and to solve vertical life safety issues. And here's our core, and here, like, we're being compliant to IBC. And then there's the next level, which is like, full CDs. Like, these are the wall assemblies, these are the doors, they're the kind of things that are going into this building. This is no different in how a general contractor or how a real estate developer is analyzing a deal. A GC is going to start with if it's a 600,000 foot building and 2/3 of it's, apartments and 1/3 is parking, and they literally will just apply, parking is this dollar amount per gross foot, and, the apartment phase is this amount per gross foot. That's their massing analysis. And then they'll do the full quantity takeoff. And then after that, they'll do the full work breakdown structure. Then they'll do the sequencing. So the interesting thing is, when you start doing sequencing, you start to think about timing. And timing is incredibly important to real estate developers who need to understand when they need to close their funding round for their building, when they need to start, how are they going to pay for the land? Like, there's a whole
Quantify the
level.
time as well in the model?
We don't currently, but that's, the grand vision. The grand vision for, deal information modeling is inclusive of how is the deal going to be executed.
So in addition to like incorporating customer feedback, you're also working on the software and tweaking, like addressing any quirks in it or anything in that. You're also you also have to educate your your customers on how to use this. It's a lot of things to juggle.
Well, yeah, it's not easy, right? You're building an airplane in mid-flight, and every time you get a new customer that supplies a piece of information or, frankly, fuel for the airplane to keep going, like here's a rocket. Like we had one guy that was so convinced that light industrial was the best market that we could go into as a commodity configurator. And I have to agree. Like we've been in industrial for all of 90 days and we've talked to 40% of the market, and it's incredible that all you had to do is show up with a product that is somewhat effective at what it does in that specific market.
And they're more accepting of it.
And more accepting of it. Oh yeah. These are big rectangles, like the new urbanism component isn't really part of what, the vision for these buildings. So that is to say,
like tilt wall buildings, right?
Oh yeah, tilt wall. Yeah,
okay.
Tilt wall, 30-foot grid, or no, 60-foot light gauge steel columns, built up roof with the, like, your main cost really is the roof. Like it's just, anyways. So that is to say, like, you're trying to set a vision for where you're headed. And like, I'm sure there's people that want to build startups in AEC that'll listen to this podcast. So you have to have a big vision. Like if you don't have a big vision, why is anybody going to care about what TestFit's doing? Yeah. Like, oh, all we do is automate your laborious tasks away. Like that mission is pretty flimsy, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of bite to that. And frankly, it's not really why I'd want to spend, 7 or 8 years of my life on a problem, right? So there's a much deeper issue, is that affordable housing in the US is a complete disaster. And if we can make the market for this kind of information more easily accessible, we can actually start to get a better ecosystem for manufactured housing, which, by the way, is only 0.3% of units constructed in the US per year right now is manufactured housing. So that's dire. Like, think about all of the billions of dollars put into that part of the ecosystem, and it has not been fruitful. Yeah. I think most of it has to do is, like, people just don't understand that, if you get in early with modular, you can have an incredible project that hits financial metrics effectively. And how do you convince a developer that's done 20,000 units in their career to change?
Yeah, that's true. So have you talked to a lot of government entities on using TestFit for their affordable housing projects and the benefits of it?
So affordable housing developers are some of the coolest people that I've had the fortune to connect with, over the last 5 years. I mean, my experience in industry was, the most expensive apartments you could possibly build and rent out. So it was really like a high design focus on apartment buildings, whereas the affordable world is, they call it workforce, which is really like, how do you create affordable housing for teachers and people that, and firemen, like people that just make society actually run.
I think they call them the missing middle. That's the term.
Missing middle is a, yeah, I mean, you could say missing middle is like from the density of, like, 4 dwelling units in a project to maybe 50. It's like, and with parking, like parking strategies that don't make cars the masters of the known universe. That's missing middle. Workforce housing is like, we're the city of San Francisco, and we need to respect the fact that people that run the subway there, like this society, like the groups that actually run society, we're not doing a great job caring for them at all in terms of their ability to live in this country. And that's like, that's motivation for me to keep pushing in TestFit.
So how could TestFit positively affect that group of people?
So you can speed up the market for information. Again, I'm not trying. I cannot disrupt design, bid, build.
Yeah.
That contract, for better or for worse, in commodity is here to stay. There's a lot of growth, I think, that you could take if you were able to eliminate that as a problem. But so operating within the confines of design, bid, build, we have to get everybody on the same page faster. And if you can get everybody on the same page faster, you eliminate a lot of the sort of overhead that it takes to get to a feasible deal for all of these people to dive into. And what I mean by that is a leadership team in a real estate company or a principal at an architecture firm, they are spending their nights and their weekends on these deals, trying to get them solved. This is how you create, more work for your firm, is creating deals and solving them. And right now, the hit rate for architects is, it's 1 in 20.
Yeah.
The hit rate for developers is 1 in 100. So and that's just absurd, right? Like, and that's a scheme ratio. It's not a deal ratio. So that is to say, like, 19 schemes that an architect draws out of 20 is thrown away.
Tossed away, yeah.
Which is absurd.
It is, yeah. So I don't want to dumb down the housing issue in this country, but you're involved in this whole world of numbers. Everything that the way you speak and all, you're constantly thinking about in terms of density and numbers. Do you think vertical density is a possible solution?
All right, I'll tell you what. If we continue down this route of more tract homes,
suburban sprawl,
lower density, I don't think it's a recipe for sustainable success. And I also get the desire of our entire, of our culture, frankly, at least in Texas, right? Of wanting to own a home and wanting to have the things that our parents had and that our grandparents had. And, I understand that. I live in a home. My wife is, she wants a home and for our kids, and, there's very real cultural problem that you have to overcome to get to a higher density, in the US. A couple of thoughts, on how to actually solve it. Like, I'm saying we're making the market more efficient, but really what we'll be able to do is to point out on where policy is weak from a government perspective. Like, I think a lot of people think that real estate developers are like really greedy and like evil in a way, and it's not necessarily true. Like, there are some that are that way and do not treat their residents well, but for the most part, like, there's very few people in the multifamily industry that I think have ill intentions. So every developer has to personally sign, like, to a loan his name. And what that means is, if you want to do like a 300 unit high density deal, there has to be a person somewhere that is willing to put their name down as that is to say, like, if this project fails, I will go down with the ship. Like, I will be bankrupt and it will be the end of, my financial life, if this project fails. So, like, architects maybe don't really understand that or appreciate the weight of that. I think, like, there is a risk taker out there. And there are architects out there that are actually taking this risk themselves. Like I've seen a few that are going into development because they're able to understand that like the project has to yield money, like at least 6% of its total cost in the first year needs to be cash flowed, or else, it's not feasible.
Yeah.
And the larger that project gets, the harder it is. After about 300 units, it turns into such a jumbo project that there's so many, like it's much more expensive in a tower. Now, if you had the same amount of money to do garden apartments, you could even build more of them. So like, this is why it's so like I'm so distraught about affordables. Like they're going to build a lot of garden apartments that people are now like, it's now a cost to them to have a car and to drive everywhere, as opposed to a more affordable place closer to work. Like,
And a garden apartment is?
the garden apartments are like 12 to 16 units in a building, and there's 14 or 15 buildings sprawled across a more organic kind of layout with surface parking.
Okay.
It's the highest yield on cost building typology out there, simply because you don't have to build structured parking, and your buildings are repetitive, and you get a lot of bonus from
But there
keeping
are
things simple.
downsides to that.
Yeah, you create a culture dependent upon cars is the main downside.
So what are your plans for the rest of this year? How is TestFit going to evolve? And do you have any partnerships with other companies?
Sure. So I'll do the partnerships first. Always looking for, people that are interested in collaborating with us. Recently, we teamed up with Enscape. We have a Enscape inside TestFit. And that's been great, specifically because we didn't really want to build a big renderer, and we'd been asked for, and it's a technology that is incredibly complex and hard to build, and hats off to Enscape for building one of the best.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking to partner like that. Like if you're the best at what you do, we would love to work with you. As for the rest of the year, really the goal for me as CEO is corporation building, is really like how do we create capacity at TestFit to go after more markets and more problems, from an engineering standpoint, but also from a sales and marketing, and basically how can we? It'd be great for us to build out DIM, but the problem is that we need to go sell it and be effective selling it. So,
would DIM be separate from TestFit, or would it be part of TestFit?
DIM is just an idea.
Just an idea.
Yeah, it's in the same way that BIM is an idea. Nobody's really been able to do it, right? Without friction is the problem. So it's an ideal, I think, to get to a place where everybody is synced. But the first barrier to fall is to simply make the syncing process go from 2 weeks to a day, enable it to be much faster.
Are you looking for customers within the States or even abroad?
So we have customers all across the world. It really depends upon what you're using it for. We have a very generic massing mode that it might be overpriced compared to like if you're just using TestFit for our massing mode, it might be overpriced compared to the likes of SketchUp, but it also has the rest of the configurators in it. So the issue with our product is that we are mostly in the US and we follow IBC. So International Building Code is our parameters are derived from some of the more some of our parameters are derived from life safety constraints present in IBC. So that means that like our floor plate configurator, our high density multifamily stuff, our even our low density stuff to some extent is perfect product market fit for the US and other IBC countries. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, it's the International Building Code, so clearly that must be every country, and that's a lie, because the International Building Code applies, I think, to like the US.
That's true.
So we are looking for opportunities to expand abroad, but again, like we don't want to fragment our focus. So we really would like to serve our existing customers and our existing market effectively first. And then as we grow the corporation, we'll be able to increase the capacity to serve a much broader group.
So I saw a video on YouTube where y'all had teamed up with Cove Tool. Is what sort of partnership is going on over there?
So energy use intensity is likely, so we talk a lot about KPIs, like key performance indicators of like how a building is doing well or if it's not doing well. And like a building efficiency is one of them. So building efficiency tells me what is the ratio of rentable area in this building versus, circulation area that I don't get to rent out, but I have to have. Energy use intensity is maybe the best KPI for how is a building going to hold up with its current orientation, over time. And that was the goal with Cove Tool. Like the integration is rather light right now. I think we're pretty happy with where it's at, but essentially you can create a building in TestFit and click a button and Cove Tool will tell us what the energy use intensity is.
Okay.
You have to have a subscription to Cove Tool, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still two separate softwares you haven't, you're not merged into one or anything. Yeah.
And I would expect for the whole world, like the whole ecosystem in AEC to look a whole lot more like that in the future, is like two independent software companies. We build a solid integration. And now we're just two nodes on a much broader network, as opposed to, Revit's a monolith that's got like, more feet. It's like this, it's like have you seen a joke Swiss Army knife? It's like this long, it can do everything, but sometimes you don't need everything.
That's true. Is there any other part of the company you'd like to discuss or focus on?
Yeah, culture. So really I broke the company down in my brain into like there's engineering, which are the people that write code and make sure that the engine runs. Product, these are the people that are helping us navigate to where we need to go. And then there's on the kind of other side of the company, there's sales and marketing, like the go-to-market side. And then, sales, there's account executives and SDRs and people that really help try to, frankly, not waste prospects' time and not waste our time. And then culture is kind of the thing in the middle that kind of helps the two groups to see that we have a, much more united approach to how we're attacking the problem. And as a CEO, my goal is getting, there's 18 of us now, get all 18 employees rowing in the same direction.
And everyone working remotely too, right?
And everyone's working remotely.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, like culture is kind of the thing that has enabled us to do that. And, I think our culture is unique. Like it's not like everybody that we've been able to hire, like they're all incredibly talented individual leaders and, great people, frankly, and everybody keeps their head down, works really hard for what we're trying to achieve. And I'm just blown away. And, culture is your people. And, I think there's a lot of founders that are like, this was my great success. And, I think people think that I'm a great wizard or something. And like reality is just like, we have a really great stable of people here that are excellent at their jobs and really love a mission. So, I don't know, just seeing them succeed is the coolest thing to me.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing everything y'all do the rest of this year and even just seeing y'all grow in the coming years, because what you're doing is really needed in the construction industry. And even though some of them might be reluctant to take y'all on, I think it's going to be widely adopted very soon.
It's we're growing faster now than we ever have, so I agree with you. Yeah, I've been encouraged. That this industry is a glass half full industry in my mind. So that is to say, like, there's optimism for change in the air, and having some of the best customers out there makes it worthwhile.
Thanks, Clifton. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Sure.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
So there are a lot of different software out there, like TestFit. There's ones that do energy analysis, programming analysis.
I think TestFit is different because I see more potential in it than the others, because it's catering towards the GCs, the ones with the money, not just the architects.
The GCs and developers.
Yeah, GCs and developers. They're the ones who actually make the decisions, get the funding.
There are other softwares out there that do what is called energy analysis, which is where they take the massing model that the architects developed and that everyone's agreed on, and they sort of analyze what all the glazing of the building is going to do, where the sun's going to come from, what the kind of carbon emissions is going to come from this building, and things like that. I think Autodesk used to have a software called Ecotech that did things like that. I don't know if that software is still around, though.
Cove Tool is another such software that does things like that. And it's extremely important. And we played around with something like that in college, too. We'd get each facade would be colored in red or purple or blue, depending on the amount of sun it theoretically received throughout the year. And we'd feel so happy when we did those analysis, and we'd put them up on our presentations and make us feel smart.
Yeah, and architects love to do that, and they love to present that to the clients. But at the end of the day, the client cares mostly about money.
Until we have strict energy requirements in building codes, and I hope we do get to that point with all these 2030 goals, it's hard for them to seriously consider long-term operational costs when they're just looking at upfront costs.
Yeah, these are the kind of things that will get value engineered out.
It's very unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. So with something like TestFit, it directly affects return on investment.
It really makes things speed up at the beginning of the schematic design process.
The part where you need to spit out as many iterations or design options as possible. It's a very... That's what's great about this software. It has defined what stage of the design process needs to be automated, and it's only focused on that part. It's tricky because the software is used by different people with very different backgrounds, like we talked about, the developers, the architects, and the GCs, and they all looking at it from different angles. So they have to put a lot of parameters in the software.
It's like 3 software in one.
Correct, yeah. So it's very tricky from that angle, because you have to talk to 3 different people with 3 different backgrounds and incorporate all their feedback into this one robust program.
Yeah, and I don't know if you really see that anywhere else, at least in my experience in the construction industry. I mean, maybe project management tools like that, but as far as BIM softwares or modeling softwares, drafting softwares, they're very specific to the architect or the designer.
Yeah, even with Revit, whenever we use it, it stops at a certain point, and you still print drawings off that, and that's taken to the job site. We're trying to get to where it still stays in a digital format, and it transforms into some augmented reality stage, but there's a clear defined start and end to its usage.
It accommodates all 3 trades.
That's what's different about TestFit. Yeah, it's not a single user.
So I think what the developers are mostly looking at the beginning is how cheap and how fast can we get this building constructed. And I think TestFit does a good job of providing those tools.
How good it's going to perform and all that can be done later during the other stages. But in the beginning stage, when you're really looking at those 2 main criteria, the cheap and the fast, this targets that very well. So this is really funny. I just saw a quote on the website, on TestFit's website, which says, "This is an incredible tool for real estate developers. It has saved me considerable time and cost."
Cheap, fast, good. Pick 2.
So I hope you enjoyed that discussion on automating building layouts. Join us next week for another episode on building science, products, and technology.